Hey, everybody. Welcome to Secure the Seat, your weekly, live podcast where we talk about what it takes to secure your seat at the table. I'm so excited for you to be here. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching us on Twitter or YouTube, hey, hey, hey. If it's your first time or your 50th time, I haven't actually done 50 of these lives, but you know what I mean. I'm happy that you're here. You could be anywhere in the world and you're here with us. I'm excited for today's conversation because we're always talking about how to make the workplace better than we found it. And I have my friend, I'm just so excited for you all to meet her if you don't know her work, but I'm going to bring Aprecia to the stage. Hey, girl. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Happy to be here. Today, we're going to talk about leading in a global context, what that means. You are the CEO of Global Strategist Association. For those who don't know about your company and about what you've been doing, tell us a little more about you.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I run Global Strategist Association now for 7 years, founded in 2013 in my hometown of Chicago, which is where I am now. And what we do is try to increase the number of people in global engagement, so the African diaspora, bring them into the fold in all things global affairs and the many sectors that encompasses that. So foreign policy, international development, make sure that space has a place for African Americans, for the African diaspora as a whole.
I love it. And I was so happy, full disclosure, me and Aprecia are friends, and we've been able to work with each other in different capacities. And I often think about leadership, but sometimes we don't talk enough about the global part of leadership and what it looks, leadership looks very different sometimes when you're leading we're talking about, hey, in New York or in the 50 states, but when we think about leadership abroad, and when I thought about that, I'm like, I got to reach out to her and bring her on. But let's start there, Aprecia. What does it mean to be a global citizen, and why is global leadership even important?
Right. So being a global citizen just means this idea that you are embracing other communities and cultures and what they bring to the table, that you see a benefit in connecting with people around the globe. You have an understanding that different communities and cultures bring in different things to make this world work and advance its mission. And so global leadership connected to that is also leveraging your skill set, leveraging your talent to help this world move better for all of us that are here, and especially for marginalized groups and communities of color who have not benefited, in the ways that other communities have in the context of academia and, every other sector. And so leveraging those cultures, communities, and leading with that cultural competency is a big thing.
Absolutely. Listen, if you have any questions, for Aprecia, start dropping those in the chat and we'll make sure that we get that. Try to get to as many questions as we can. I know I see folks are watching us on all the platforms, so welcome to Secure the Seat Live. We hope that by the end of our time, you consider yourself a global citizen, or you'll at least start to think through what that looks like. And if you're not able to stay with us the entire time, we're going to drop in Aprecia's information at GSA so that you can stay connected and follow her. So let's talk a little bit more about your company. You all are committed to changing the face of global affairs through diversity, equity, and inclusion. How are you doing that? And what does that mean to even create solutions that would tackle that?
Right. It's a big task. I think for us, what we have been trying to do is invest in our talent here and to expose our community to opportunities in a global context. Unfortunately, because of the racism that permeates not just in America, but around the globe, our leaders, Black leaders across the board, have not been introduced to these opportunities. And so although we want to see leaders advance at the local level, at the state level, and at the country level, there is work to be done in the global context. There is work to be done in all of our international institutions that are driving these missions and predominantly dealing with communities of color. And so having a Black voice in the space will allow for a different lens that is very sensitive, to what we endure as communities of color. So that's important. And that's what we've been trying to do.
I love that so much. In the chat, I'm seeing that. I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's because it's so important. Thank you for that. You know, the other thing, since you touched on it, what would be the grade that you would give those who are currently working toward these issues in DEI globally?
You know, I'm going between an F and a D, honestly.
Okay.
And it's not just for Black voices, but it's who's leading these teams, you know, at the local level. Whether you're talking about a mission trip in Ghana, or you're talking about right now what we're in at the UN is the decade, you know, for African people, and yet it's not many African Americans and people within the African diaspora as a whole, you know, in those leadership positions. And so I want people to say, yes, we want to be at the table, but leverage your skill set to lead, because leading is very different than being set in a space where you don't have the permission to speak or to detail, you know, what practices should look like at the ground level. So I'm going between a D and an F, especially here in America, because many of our, you know, international NGOs are not doing so great in that space. There is an awareness that came with the summer of 2020, right? For people to see and do more. I do think the Biden administration is doing a really good job of bringing our folks, you know, at the governmental level, but we have to do more work.
I love that. You know, let's take a question from the chat. I see that somebody's asking, Appreciate, loving the conversation. They said, what does it mean to you to be a leader? That's a good place to start.
Right. There are many things. What I for myself, in my opinion, have experienced is that leadership for me is the ability to create and carve out a space for somebody else to walk in. And so even before I started my own company, I used to be having backroom meetings with all the Black members, like, this is what you do, this is what it says in the policy, don't say this, ask for this. And I've always been able to do that. I've always kind of been like a person that, you know, helps people pass through the door of difficult workspaces or workspaces that are not necessarily sensitive to our dichotomy. And so for me, leadership is making space for other people to get in. And that's what I've been trying to do my entire career.
Well, we thank you for it, and we thank you for all the things that you're doing. Somebody said they would give the U.S. an F.
Yeah. It's terrible right now.
well, that means there's a lot of room for improvement.
It is, but I do want to say that I have friends right now that have been tapped to work at state under this administration, the current administration, folks that are in Department of Defense. And so that's a big change. I think the Biden administration has done a really good job of opening up international positions to people who are non-white. And so hopefully that's the trajectory going up and not going back. And so I hope to see more of that.
Yep, me too. Absolutely. I see that there's quite a few questions. Let's take another. Mike, can you throw one up on the screen? Good morning. What advice would you give for reaching out to organizations to start the conversation regarding investing in cultural competencies?
You know, I personally had my challenges with reaching out to other organizations. I think it's a good thing to show the numbers card to folks. You know, some people use the bottom line. I don't think that's a good thing. I have personally had internal dialogue about using folks, you know, as a bottom line piece to say, hey, you should increase diversity, because we know how, you know, how we got in this country and our labor not being paid. And so for me, it's been, hey, this is the area that you're working in. This is the demographic of that community. How would you like to leverage, you know, your resources to bring in that community and get the buy-in from that community? And so that's kind of what I've been trying to do. Like in Chicago, we have a lot of institutions that have, you know, centered themselves in very predominantly white spaces. And what we're saying is you got to come out of those white spaces and to see the talent and see the communities, you know, that are beyond that, what we call the downtown corridor, right? The mag mile space. And so we've been trying to do that. And I think that's one of the ways. All the talent that comes out of our community, I mean, it cannot be overstated. It's amazing. And these folks do amazing work. And we just got to keep putting that out there.
Absolutely. I know that this wasn't a question that I had to ask you, but I think it's relevant. So you have a fellowship program at GSA. Can you talk about that? Because I think it's important to talk about it, because I think others might get some ideas too.
Sure. So with the fellowship program, we're revamping it now, of course, during the COVID era. But what initially what we wanted to do was bring in folks into Chicago to share their expertise in the global community. And so some of our fellows are stationed in Brazil, in Colombia. We have a fellow that writes for The Root on global issues and is a foreign scholar on Ukraine and Russian affairs. And so letting people know that these folks are out there. Not only are we training and development, because I have an issue with training and development, just, a little bit, but we're amplifying their voices. And I think fellowships need to do more to amplify the voices. Yes, we want to train our folks, but some of our folks are more advanced, that have been in more mentorship programs than their white counterparts. So I don't think they can get any more trained or any more development, but amplifying, exposing, curating the space to let them do what they do. That's what we try to do in our fellowship.
Yeah, I love that so much. Earlier today I had a talk, and one of the questions was, what do you think about internships? We're starting to recruit at HBCUs. I said, that's great, but it's yes, and there's don't forget about the people in the middle of the pipeline. Don't forget the people who need to be advanced. And like you said, we can train. Yeah, training is good, but actually people need to be advanced. They need some opportunities. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes, I love that. I want to jump back into a question. Since you were talking about training and development, are there any skills or training that you think some of our leaders right now watching and who will watch in the future replay could be doing to start having more of a global competency? Can be thinking about, even as African Americans here, are we thinking about what is happening on the other continents, right? What can we be doing, or periodicals that we can be reading just to be in the know?
Right. I think there are several things. Of course, travel, which has been on the hiatus since COVID, was a big way, right, to increase our understanding of communities and cultures around the globe. The other way is just connecting with people. We're in the social media age and era, and so it's so easy to be globally, aware very quickly by following somebody in a different culture, a different country online, whether that's through Twitter or on LinkedIn, connecting intentionally, connecting with folks from different communities, connecting with folks from India, connecting with folks from Nigeria or Ghana. I think for us, especially Americans, we're trying to get out of that American exceptionalism, like we know everything and we can tell folks. But there's a lot to be learned from communities across the globe. We saw that with the global Black Lives Matter protests happening around the world, where we found out in France, Black folks had an issue in different countries. And so listening, learning, and being intentional about that engagement. Some of the people that I think I like to follow and listen along to is when there's protests and activists, that are showing what's happening in their particular countries. Follow them on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn, see what they're saying. And it's beyond a book, because I think you get the firsthand account, right? Mm-hmm. You don't get the government or the institutions telling you who is important. It's everyday people sharing their personal stories. And we as Americans know how important it is to have our own voice. And so I think we need to be a little bit more intentional about engaging folks at the local level in these particular cultures and communities.
Absolutely. Great advice. Mm-hmm. I see the chat is blowing up. They're like, oh, thank you so much. And, and it's true that's a whole, probably another conversation, is this exceptionalism that we have here, right? But to your point, when the Black Lives Matter demonstrations were happening last summer, we saw all across the globe people were engaged, right? And I think that we can do the same too I know right now there's some different things happening in India, right? We can all be aware of these things, and we can be global leaders to really help in that context. So I love that so much. We're going to jump into our bonus questions, but if you have a couple of extra questions that you want to make sure that I try to get to, appreciate why we're here, drop them in. We'll try to get to a couple before, but friend, I am a lover of grits and rap lyrics. and I have to. Well, first of all, are you a grits lover?
I am a grits lover.
Okay. I'm scared to ask. How do you have your grits?
So I can take them either way. So I can. My stepdad, who is from the South, when he would make them with salt and pepper. I loved that way. As I got older, I was introduced to sugar. I love that way too. It's not as I get older, I'm trying to, cut out sugar from my diet. So I'm not eating sugar with them as much, but I can take them either way. I say, hey, it's room for both. It's room for both. I love them both.
Okay, well, you're right. You definitely should take that sugar out of your diet. I'm an advocate for that. Not that salt is any better, but we'll pick it. But what is your favorite rap lyric and why?
You know what? When you sent me this, I was like, oh my God, I haven't thought about this in a long time. I think for different decades and eras, there are different lyrics that really touch my heart. I'm a J. Cole fan, a stan. And so anything Cole has, it's always at the top of my head. Right now, though, I listen to the soundtrack of Judas and the Black Messiah about, Chicago hero Fred Hampton. And there was a local artist named Polo G in there. And he had a lyric in his song called The Last Man Standing that said, why do I have to prove to you that my black tail matter? Like, why does my work have to center around me proving my humanity to you? And I thought about that. I said so much of who we are and what we do is wrapped up in just proving, that I'm an actual human being and that my thoughts and my ideas and my journey and my experiences matter. And that's my favorite rap lyric this week.
I love it. And it's very apropos for Black history and every day. But I love that so much. If you haven't had a chance to watch the Fred Hampton it's not a documentary, a movie, I believe it's on HBO Max, and great. If you're not familiar with the Black Panthers, need some context into how far we've come and how far we still need to go. But I love that lyric so much. And people are loving it too. In the chat, my last question for you, Aprecia, is I believe that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. We can all have the capacity to do that right now. At any moment, we can activate that. But what advice would you give everyone watching today and listening in the future about how they can make the workplace better than they found it?
I think for me, and I had to embrace this at a very young age. I am a person who loves to stand up for people, and it doesn't matter what space I'm in. I mean, I remember driving down the street and pulling over one time because I saw somebody hitting somebody, and I had to jump out. And my sister was like, "Don't do that!" I was like, "No, we're gonna stop." But don't be afraid to be a disruptor. Don't be afraid to come in and challenge the status quo. And I think the only way so many of us tap into our courage is by watching the manifestation of other people be disruptive to the status quo. And so I know it can be challenging because you don't want to be labeled. And, of course, that very negative connotation with Black women and women of color as a whole is you're angry, you're bitter, all of that. But I say there is a way to be a disruptor and get the buy-in from folks who wish they had stood up for other folks, right? And so I've always embraced that. It is my job to somehow leave a little bit of courage in this space that I'm in. And the only way I can do that outside of trying to lecture folks is by showing them what courage looks like. So disruption all the way through.
I'm here for it. You got me wanting to put up the black fist. Yes. Yes. And those who don't know, the definition of courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. It takes something to be courageous, right? But lean into it. You'll feel so much better. At least people will know where your line in the sand is for yourself, for others, but we have to be role models, right?
And I think too, that's one thing that global leadership takes. And this idea of global citizenship is that many communities of color have operated in a space of courage because that's the way that they've been able to survive. And in a global world where people are very hostile to their very being. And so to be able to leverage that and see that, and I want for our people to say that I can go beyond this company that is limiting me, or I don't have to subject myself to these restrictions. Do what you can on the local level, but also aspire to the global work because there's work to be done and our voices and our experiences matter in that work.
Absolutely. Amen and amen. I see like the hand clap emoji just going off. We have time, I think, for one more question. I love that so much. Mike, can you throw up a question on the board? I think that, there were quite a few in there. And then also we'll make sure that we drop Aprecia's information in there so that you can stay connected, book her to speak. We have the U.S. can have a tendency to impose solutions on other parts of the world. What is the best way to co-create solutions from the very beginning? Very great question, Dia. Thank you.
I saw this question earlier, and what I think is kind of what we're going through here is that with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I guess a story for a different day, but I'm breaking up with diversity in some degree, and it's been hard, is that folks who are on the ground, who are living this experience, need to lead. They don't need to be co-creators of what impacts them directly. And I think the U.S., hopefully with this new leadership coming in, understand that you need to take a background to what folks want to do directly, what they want to do. What do the local leaders say? What do the local communities say? What are their solutions? Not let us bring you our solutions and we think you need to buy in or we don't want to be at the table. No, let folks lead. Let Black women lead. Let Indian women lead. Let folks who have never had a voice for centuries stand up and take the lead. We're done with sitting at the tables listening to folks tell us what we think we should do. No, take a seat in the background and for once support those who have never had an opportunity to lead. It's time for folks to lead globally.
Hey, where's my tambourine? It's the truth. You know, this past Saturday, I was teaching a course and at NYU on talent development, and I invited Chief Diversity Officer, Global Diversity Officer David Casey at CVS Health, and he was talking to our class about, you know, we also had to think about vaccine distribution in the United States, but then also globally because CVS is global, right? So you have to think about it different. And even from, like you said, community-based, why is it that Black people don't like to get vaccinated? Because they've had this very negative experience with vaccines in the United States. And so he had to leverage the local activists to encourage their communities to take the vaccine. So you hit it on the head.
No, it's true. Everything you're saying is true, and he was absolutely right. It's kind of something, you know, that's happening here in Chicago. Everybody know this is one of the most segregated cities, and we're still dealing with that. Even though we have Black leadership everywhere, we're still dealing with the effects of segregation here. And so it was Black folks who, when the numbers were terrible for Black people getting vaccinated a couple of weeks ago, said, you got to get into the barbershops, you got to get into the community. Folks are not going to be able to travel this far. That's not what our community looks like. So it's governments and institutions looking to the leaders in our communities to get the answers, not telling them what you do, and not that co-creator thing, because America has a tendency to take over. So it's like, no, step to the back and let folks lead, because we know what we're doing. We've been trained and mentored and developed and curated and schooled and everything else. We're ready to lead.
Give us the baton. We're ready to run.
There you go.
I love this conversation so much. Listen, if you want to connect, support the work that Aprecia is doing, invite her to speak. Listen, Women's History Month is next month. If you're not thinking about what these conversations that Black women need to be part of, reach out to her. We're going to drop her information in the chat. Follow her here on LinkedIn. I'm going to give you the final word, Ms. CEO. Is there anything else you want to just leave our listeners with as they're thinking about going into the week?
Sure. I do want to say, as we get more immersed in this diversity work and it's Black History Month, I do want to say, think of diversity as the floor and not the ceiling. I'm looking for more imaginative ways to see our people show up in these spaces. And as I said, I think I'm breaking up with diversity, and it's because I don't see the numbers overall really moving that much. And so I remember I was in a meeting, I'll say it very swiftly, 2019, right before COVID happened, and somebody said, what's your diversity numbers? And this is a very highly, celebrated organization. And they said, well, we're just focusing on diversity of thought. And nothing broke my heart more than that. And I said, oh my gosh, that's where we are with diversity. Now I'm gonna need y'all to look at your racial equity then, because diversity is actually not working for us. So I want people to start seeing all these things that we have into these spaces as the floor and not the ceiling. Be more imaginative with this work and push people to do more than what they're doing right now. They can do it.
That is a word. It's the floor, not the ceiling. If you don't get anything from today, which Appreciate dropped a lot of gems, but definitely let that one marinate in your system. Let me check the date. Is this Sunday? Are we preaching on a Sunday or is this Monday afternoon? But I appreciate. I thank you so much for the work that you're doing, helping us become better global citizens. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing, and it's so important. And I hope everybody watching today will think about their contribution, right, to being a global citizen. It's so important. We hope that others will, when we were going through certain things here in the United States last year, and still we want people to be supportive of our, communities and our initiatives. So let's make sure that we're doing that for others as well. Where's the best place for people to connect with you? We dropped it in the chat, but if there's other places.
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is here. You can also find me on Twitter, where I'm a little bit more vocal, AD Faulkner1, and GSA as well, gsachicago.org, if you're interested more about the organization.
Yes, well, I definitely hope that you'll tweet more about why you're breaking up with diversity, because I'm sure so many of us want to know your thoughts on that. But thank you all for joining us today. We know that you could spend your time anywhere and you come with us. Come and join in on Mondays at noon. So we'll see you next week. We hope you all will keep securing your seat and think about and share this episode with someone who could really benefit from it, which I believe is everybody. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.